of Mount Kōrin. The handboard in the courtyard was struck 3 times before dawn, flat wooden blows that seemed to come from inside my ribs. The winter air of Kyoto carried smoke from cooking fires and the sharper scent of frost on stone. In the meditation hall, the lamps still burned low, their oil giving off a faint sweetness that mixed with old cedar and last night's incense. We sat facing the wall, knees folded, robes gathered like dark water around our legs. Breath came and went. Thoughts rose and fell. Somewhere in the rafters a sparrow shifted its feet. Then, beyond the plastered wall of our compound, a horse snorted. Hooves scraped. A man's cough followed, too loud for a monk, too cautious for a soldier. Even before the attendant's soft steps came along the veranda, I knew the morning would not remain only morning. A slip of paper passed down the row. I did not open it in the hall. I folded it into my sleeve and kept my eyes on the wall until the bell that ended, zazen sounded, and we rose together, the room exhaling as one body. Outside, the sky was still the color of ink washed thin. The gate porter waited with his shoulders hunched and a traveler's pack at his feet. He bowed too deeply for a messenger, and not deeply enough for a pilgrim. He spoke a name and did not need to add a title. I had met the man he served once, years ago, in a garden where gravel had been raked into waves and a sword lay across a lord's knees as naturally as a fan. "Our master asks for a monk," he said, "a monk who can keep men from cutting each other open." I read the paper in the cold light. The characters were hurried and uneven, as if written with a brush held in shaking fingers. "A bell has been taken from Mount Kōrin. Without it, the oath will not be sworn. The summit is tomorrow." The porter said, "They gather at the foot of the mountain. 2 houses, 2 armies, 1 narrow valley between them. If the treaty fails, there will be fire." I let the paper rest against my palm a moment longer than necessary. The ink had soaked deep. It would not rub away. In the corridor leading to the abbot's quarters, I could already hear the morning activity, brooms across stone, the clink of buckets at the well. A monastery is a machine built of silence and small sounds. When a foreign sound enters, everything notices. My teacher's door slid open before I reached it. He did not ask why I had come. He had always been a man who listened past words. "You will go," he said. His voice was the same as it had been when I arrived at this place as a youth. Neither kind nor cruel, merely clear. Not because lords deserve saving, but because the peasants under their banners do. He studied me as if I were a bowl, and he were checking for cracks. "I will go," I said. He nodded once. "Do not carry their fear as if it were yours, and do not imagine that you are pure because you wear a robe." Then he added, almost idly, as though commenting on the weather, "A bell is not an oath. A bell is only bronze, but men are willing to die for bronze." I bowed. In the yard, the messenger's horse stamped impatiently. I did not take it. I had not ridden in years and had no wish to arrive looking like a man trying to hurry past himself. I took my staff, my bowl, and a small pouch of dried rice. The porter stared. "It is a day's walk," he said. "At least." "Then I will arrive as a monk," I answered. We left through the main gate as the first pale edge of sun touched the tiled roofs. Behind us, the monastery's own bell began to sound. Deep, patient. The kind of sound that does not chase anything. It is the voice that calls you to where you already are. I wondered, as we passed into the city streets, what it meant that Mount Kōrin's bell had been silenced, and whether anyone had noticed the silence before they noticed the danger. The road east from Kyoto follows the water. It dips through low villages where persimmon trees stand bare and crooked, then rises toward the ridge where the lake's breath begins. In winter, Lake Biwa sends out mist like a slow animal, and the fields take it in. The world becomes layered, reed beds half seen, the shape of a fishing boat softened until it looks like a memory. By mid-morning, the city lay behind us. The messenger walked beside me, his sandals slapping harder than mine. He kept glancing back as if expecting Kyoto to follow. We passed a roadside shrine with a stone fox darkened by smoke and rain. Someone had tied fresh rice straw to its neck and placed a single orange in its paws. The orange's skin was bright as lacquer against the grey. "Their bell," the porter said after a long silence. "They say it binds oaths." "Who says?" I asked. "The mountain people," he replied, "and the lords when it suits them." "A bell binds only what a man is willing to bind," I said. He looked at me as if I had spoken in riddles. "Most people think Zen is riddles. In truth, it is usually only a refusal to lie." At a post town where the road narrowed and a small stream crossed under a plank bridge, we stopped for water. The innkeeper's wife watched us with cautious eyes. Monks are welcomed and distrusted in equal measure. We live on alms and yet are never entirely outside the world's hunger. She poured water into my bowl. "Mount Kōrin's bell?" she asked, as if the question itself were a piece of gossip to be traded for pennies. "They say it was cast in the old days before the wars ate the capital. A fine bell, too fine for that mountain." Her husband muttered, "Fine bronze makes fine weapons." She slapped his shoulder with the back of her hand. "Don't speak like that in front of a priest." I did not correct her. I was not a priest in her sense. Still, the husband's words hung in the air like smoke. "Fine bronze makes fine weapons. A bell is not only a bell when men are sharpening swords." Past the town, the land began to climb. Pines gave way to cedar. The trunks rose straight as temple pillars, their bark wet and dark. The path narrowed, and the mist thickened until each step seemed to enter a new room of white. Mount Kōrin appeared late in the day, not as a single peak, but as a folded shoulder of ridges. Its lower slopes were quilted with winter fields, the terraces edged by stone walls. Higher up, the forest closed into a darker mass. Somewhere within it, the temple waited, and somewhere beyond that, an invisible line separated two provinces, two sets of taxes, two armies, two stories about who owned what. The messenger stopped at a bend and pointed. There, the mountain gate. I saw the first temple roof then, a slant of tile half hidden among cedar boughs. A narrow stone stair climbed toward it, slick with moss and frost. We ascended in silence. A temple does not announce itself. It lets you arrive at the fact of it. At the top of the stairs stood the Sanmon gate, its wood blackened by age. The guardian statues inside glared outward with fierce carved eyes, their mouths open as if still shouting. Their rage felt almost gentle after a day of mist. A novice met us in the courtyard. His head was shaved, his face too young for the tiredness around his eyes. He bowed quickly, then again more carefully, as if correcting himself. "You are Ryosen of Myoshinji," he said, the name not quite a question. "Our abbot has been waiting." He led us along a covered corridor. The boards creaked underfoot. Beyond the corridor's open side, the mountain fell away into mist. Somewhere below I heard water moving over rock. The abbot's room was warm with charcoal heat. A single kettle hissed softly on a brazier. The abbot of Mount Kōrin sat with his back straight, hands folded, eyes like stones that had seen many winters. I had met him once, years before, at a memorial service. He had been younger then. Now his eyebrows were white. He did not rise when I entered. He did not need to. Respect in a monastery is measured in attention, not posture. "Ryosen," he said. "Shunei," I replied, using his temple name. He nodded toward the empty space beside him. I sat. For a time we listened to the kettle. Outside, a wind moved through the cedar needles. It made a sound like distant rain. "The bell was taken last night," he said at last. He spoke as if stating the day's weather, but his fingers tightened slightly where they rested on his knee. "How?" I asked. "Quietly," he said, "which is how all thefts begin and most wars." He gestured toward the door. "Come." We crossed the courtyard. The temple's bell tower stood at the edge where the ground dropped steeply. It was a simple structure, 4 posts and a roof open to the air. Beneath it hung nothing. The space was an absence you could feel in the lungs. A bell is a body, and when it is gone, the air looks wrong, like a sleeve without an arm. The novice who had led us stood with his hands tucked into his sleeves, staring at the emptiness. The abbot said, "This bell was cast in the years of the shogun Ashikaga Yoshinori. A local lord paid for it as penance after burning a village. The inscription says its sound is for all beings in the 6 realms." He looked up at the roof beams where the bell's chain had hung. "Now its sound is for merchants and soldiers." I stepped beneath the tower. The wooden beam from which the bell had been suspended showed fresh cuts. Rope fibers clung like pale hair. On the damp earth below, I saw marks where something heavy had been dragged. A bell of even modest size leaves a stubborn record. Bronze does not travel like wind. "Did you have guards?" I asked. Shunei's mouth tightened. "We are a Zen temple. Our guards are our vows." "And your vows were asleep," I said, not unkindly. He did not protest. "We have lay brothers," he admitted. "2 men who sleep near the storehouse. They heard nothing." I crouched and touched the earth. Cold mud, grit, the scent of wet cedar. I followed the drag marks with my eyes. They led toward the path that ran behind the tower, down into the forest. "Oxen," I said. The abbot's gaze sharpened. "You can tell that from mud?" "The marks are wide," I said, "and the drag line is too straight for men pulling alone. Whoever took it had time and patience, and they knew we do not keep armed men." The novice spoke then, his voice thin. "They took the striker too." I turned. "The shumoku," he nodded. "The log that swings to strike the bell. It was gone in the morning, like the bell." That mattered. A thief who steals bronze for coin does not usually bother with the striker. A thief who wants the bell to be silent might. Or a thief who knows that without the striker, even a recovered bell cannot be rung quickly. Shunei watched my face. "What do you think?" I straightened slowly. Mist drifted through the open sides of the tower. It passed through the empty space where the bell had been, as if testing the lack. "I think," I said, "someone wanted the bell removed from the world of this temple and placed into the world of men." "That is all bells," Shunei said softly. "They ring in the world of men." "Yes," I replied, "but this one was meant to ring above their arguments. They are trying to pull it down to their level." He led me back to his room and poured tea. The tea was bitter, the kind that wakes you rather than comforts you. "The summit is tomorrow," he said. "Lord Akiyama comes from the lake shore. Lord Tsuruga comes from the eastern pass. Their men have been skirmishing over the border villages for 2 seasons. This treaty is meant to stop it before the spring planting, before hunger becomes anger." He held the tea bowl without drinking. "They demanded that the oath be sworn to the bell. Each lord will strike it once after signing the written pledge. The mountain people believe the sound binds the promise and carries it to the Buddhas and the mountain kami. Without that sound, the lords say their vassals will not accept the treaty." "And if they do not accept it," I said, "the lords will claim their hands are forced." Shunei's eyes flicked to the alcove where a scroll hung. On it were the characters for Mu, nothingness, painted with a single fierce stroke. "Each faction insists it did not steal the bell," he said. "Each sends word accusing the other." "Do you believe them?" I asked. He did not answer at once. That was his answer. I set my bowl down. "Show me the lay brothers," I said, "and anyone who was awake in the night." The lay brothers were farmers' sons who worked the temple's woodlot and carried rice up the mountain in exchange for blessings and a place to sleep. They knelt awkwardly, eyes down, palms sweating on their thighs. They swore they had heard nothing. One said his wife was ill and he had been praying in his sleep. The other said he had drunk too much doburoku at the evening meal. Neither story was elegant. Most truth is not. I asked the novice who had first met me, his name was Jinnen, about the night. He said the evening bell had rung as usual at the hour of the dog. Then the monks had sat, then slept. In the night there had been fog thick enough to make the courtyard lamp a weak star. "No one came to the gate," he said. "At least, I did not hear." "Did you smell anything?" I asked. He blinked, confused. "Smell?" "Oxen," I said. "Wet straw, sweat, lantern oil, anything foreign." He shook his head slowly. "Only the mountain," he said. "Cedar, smoke, mist." I walked the perimeter of the temple grounds as the light faded. The temple was built on a shelf of land carved from the slope. Behind it, the mountain rose steep and dark. Below it, the ridge fell away into a valley of white. At the edge of the grounds, near the path descending into the forest, I found what I had expected. Fresh scuffs on stones where a heavy load had passed, crushed ferns, and half buried under wet leaves, a scrap of rope end cut clean. The rope was thick, the kind used for hauling timber. On the rope was a smear of something dark and sticky. I brought it to my nose. Pine resin. Carpenters use resin to keep fibers from fraying to make rope grip. So do charcoal burners when they lash bundles. So do smugglers when they tie down goods. It was not temple rope. Our ropes were hemp, plain, untreated. I looked down the path. It disappeared into the cedar trunks, swallowed by mist. Somewhere below, an ox cart would be moving, slowly, patiently, on a road that avoided the main posts where tolls are collected and questions asked. I returned to Shunei and placed the rope on the mat. "Someone brought their own tools," I said. This was planned. He stared at the rope as if it were a snake. "Then it was one of the lords." "Or someone who wants the lords to think so," I said. He lifted his eyes to mine. "They will kill each other over this." "Over a bell," I corrected. "And over the excuse the bell provides." Outside, the first snow began, thin, tentative flakes drifting into the lantern light. Shunei said, "Ryusen, if you find it, can you bring it back in time?" I thought of the bell's weight. Even a small temple bell can weigh as much as a bull. To move it up the mountain again would take oxen and men. Time was not a thing one could bargain with. "I will bring back what I can," I said. He did not press. He bowed his head slightly, an acknowledgement and a plea. Before leaving, I went to the bell tower one last time. I stood beneath the empty roof and listened. In the absence of bronze, I heard other sounds. The scrape of a monk's broom, the far rush of the stream, the wind moving through cedar. The mountain was not silent, only the symbol was. I turned and began to descend into the mist. Night on a mountain road is a different world. The trees become walls. The path becomes a narrow thread between blackness. A traveler's lantern makes a small circle of certainty, surrounded by doubt. I did not carry a lantern. I knew the way by the feel of the stones under my sandals and by the slope of the ground. When the fog thickened, it was like walking inside breath. My staff tapped softly, wood on stone, stone on wood. Below the temple, the path widened into a track used by woodcutters. It ran along a ridge, then dropped in switchbacks. Here and there I saw the faint print of ox hooves, the deep mark of a cartwheel. The thief had not hidden his passage. He had simply trusted the mountain to erase it. I followed the prints until the track joined a larger road, a rough mountain road that led toward the eastern pass. Somewhere beyond that pass lay the villages under Lord Tsuruga's influence. To the west, down toward the lake, were Lord Akiyama's lands. A bell taken from the temple could be sent either way, and both lords would be blamed. At a fork where one road descended toward the lake and the other climbed toward the pass, I stopped. The fog was thinner here. Through the cedar trunks I saw the pale shape of water far below, the lake, a sheet of dull metal. On the ground at the fork lay a fresh clump of straw, trampled, wet with mud. Oxen stopping to rest or being turned. I listened. No cart creak, no low animal breath. Only the wind. I chose the road toward the pass. The thief would not take the obvious way. If he wanted to frame the eastern lord, he would send the bell toward the east. If he wanted to frame the western lord, he would send it toward the lake. But if he wanted to keep it for himself, he would go where neither lord looked. The mountain's hidden paths, the small shrines where travelers leave coins and do not ask questions. In the next hour, I passed 3 such shrines. One held a weathered jizo with a red bib faded almost pink. Someone had placed a child's wooden toy at its feet. Another shrine was only a stone marker with a single carved character for mountain. The third was an Inari shrine, its small torii gate leaning. A fox statue crouched beside it, its snout chipped. At the Inari shrine I smelled something, lantern oil, fresh. I stepped off the road and into the trees. The ground was thick with fallen needles. My sandals made no sound. Through the trunks I saw a small light, shielded by a cloth. 2 men crouched beside a bundle. Their heads were wrapped in cloth. One held a small lamp. The other was tying something with rope. Between them lay a length of timber, heavy, smooth, with dents along one side. A bell striker. As I watched, the second man spat and muttered, "Damn thing's heavier than it looks." The first answered, "Heavy things make good coin." I stepped into the circle of light. They froze. The lamp flame jumped. Neither reached for a sword immediately. That told me something. Bandits draw steel at fear. Smugglers draw steel at threat. I held my staff lightly, not raised. My hands were visible. The first man's eyes narrowed. "A monk," he said, as if it were an accusation. "I'm a traveller," I replied. He laughed once, harsh. "A traveller who walks mountain roads at night without a lantern?" "I've walked them before," I said. "And I have no wish to steal your lamp." The second man's hand moved toward his waist. A knife, perhaps. His shoulders were tense. I looked at the timber. "That belongs to the bell tower of Mount Kōrin," I said. The first man's gaze flicked to it, then back to me. His mouth tightened. "I do not know what you speak of," he said. "You know," I said, "your hands smell of bronze." He blinked, surprised. "It is a small thing, the smell of metal on skin, but it clings." The second man barked, "Kill him!" The first snapped, "Quiet!" He studied me again. "What do you want, priest?" "I want the bell returned," I said simply. The first man's laugh came again, but this time it was almost weary. "Returned? Do you know what a bell is worth? Do you know what lords pay for bronze when they want cannon mouths and arrowheads?" "Do you know," I asked, "what it is worth to be able to sleep without hearing men scream?" He stared at me. For a moment the fog seemed to press closer, listening. The second man's knife flashed into the light. "Enough talk." I did not move. If I stepped back, he would take it as fear. If I stepped forward, he would take it as attack. I stood as one stands before a teacher in Sanzen, with whatever is in front of you, nothing hidden. The first man's voice dropped. "We were paid," he said. "By whom?" I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation was a doorway. "By a man from the lake," he said finally. "A retainer. He came with coin and a promise of more." A retainer, not a lord. That meant the lord could claim innocence and still benefit. It also meant the retainer might be acting without permission or acting as the lord's shadow. "Where is the bell?" I asked. The second man snarled. "He'll take it back to his lord and will be dead." The first man's eyes were hard now. "We move it at dawn," he said. "Not up the mountain, down, to the shrine at Kuroishi. From there, a foundry man will take it." Kuroishi Shrine was not far, an old place on a ridge where pilgrims stopped before crossing the pass. It was also a place where offerings could hide anything. "Why take the striker?" I asked. The first man shrugged. "The man who paid said to take it. Said without it the bell's no use to them." "Them," I repeated. He did not answer. I nodded once, as if I had been given directions to an inn. "Thank you," I said. The second man stared. "That's it?" "That is it," I said. He raised the knife, confused by my calm. The first man grabbed his wrist and forced it down. "Let him go," the first said. "A monk's blood brings curses, and he did not threaten us." I turned away. Behind me the lamp's small light trembled. I walked back to the road and into the fog. My heart was steady. Fear comes when you imagine yourself as something separate. On a mountain road at night, the fog teaches you what Zen has always said. There is no separate. Still, as I walked, I felt the weight of what I had learned. A bell hauled toward a foundry, a retainer from the lake, dawn approaching, and two armies waiting for an excuse. Kuroishi Shrine sat on a stony outcrop above the pass. In daylight, it must have looked out over the ridges, like a hawk over its hunting ground. In fog, it was only a darker smudge in white. I reached it before dawn. The sky was lightening behind the mist, turning it from grey to pale blue. The shrine's torii gate loomed suddenly out of nothing, its wood damp and streaked with lichen. Within the shrine grounds stood an ancient camphor tree, its trunk thick as a house pillar. Rope and paper streamers hung around it, Shimenawa marking it as sacred. Beneath it, stone foxes crouched with moss on their backs. A small hall stood to one side. The door was shut. No light showed. The world held its breath before morning. I circled the ground slowly. At the back, near a stack of firewood, I found what I had come for, fresh wheel ruts, deep in the mud, straw scattered, and a mark where something heavy had been set down. The bell was here. But where? A shrine is full of places to hide. Behind the hall, beneath the raised floor, in the storehouse, in the brush beyond the boundary stones. And a bell is a large thing, But men have learned for centuries how to hide large things, especially sins. I listened, not for human voices, those can be silenced. For the small betrayals, the creak of wood under weight, the hiss of breath in cold air, the shift of straw. From the brush beyond the storehouse came a faint sound, the low grunt of an ox. I moved through the shrubs, branches wetting my sleeves. The brush opened into a narrow clearing behind a rock outcrop. There, half covered with reeds and cloth, lay the bell. Even lying on its side, it looked like a sleeping animal, its bronze skin dark, its raised bands catching the dim light. The dragon handle at its crown was smeared with mud. Along its flank, the little rounded knobs stood like small stars. Beside it stood 3 men and an ox cart. The ox's breath came out in clouds. One of the men wore a simple farmer's jacket. Another wore a better coat, and at his waist a short sword hung in a lacquered scabbard. The third man was in monk's robes. For a moment I thought my eyes had made a mistake. But no. The shaved head. The robe gathered at the waist. The familiar shape of sleeves. It was Jinnen. He was not alone. The man with the sword spoke to him sharply. Jinnen flinched. I stepped into the clearing. All 3 turned. Jinnen's face went pale. His mouth opened, then closed. He bowed reflexively, as if the habit of the temple were stronger than the moment. "Ryosen," he whispered. The man with the sword narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" he demanded. I did not answer him first. I looked at Jinnen. "You were awake," I said. His eyes flicked toward the bell, then away. His jaw trembled. I did not mean—" The swordsman cut in. "He is no one, a wandering priest. Leave him and we go." He took a step toward me, hand on his hilt. I lifted my staff slightly, not as a weapon, but as a marker of space. "If you draw steel on shrine ground," I said, "you may win a moment and lose a lifetime." He sneered. "Spare me your curses." "Curses are only names for consequences," I said. "And consequences are patient." He hesitated. That was enough. Men who are certain do not hesitate. I turned my gaze back to Jinnen. "Why?" I asked. His throat worked. He looked like someone drowning in his own breath. "I heard them talking," he said finally. His voice was thin and hoarse. "The lords. Their messengers came here to the abbot. They spoke of the bell as if it were a chain to bind each other. They spoke of the oath like a trick. And I remembered the village." "The village?" I asked. His eyes glistened. 3 years ago," he whispered, "Lord Akiyama's men burned my father's house. They said the Eastern Lord had hidden fighters there. They said it was necessary. My mother, she died in the smoke. My little brother, I could not pull him out." The fog seemed to thicken, as if the mountain itself were listening. Jinnen swallowed hard. "They want to strike the bell and call it peace," he said. "They want to make the mountain witness their paper and ink, but they will break it when it suits them. They always do." I felt the old anger rise in me, familiar and useless. It is easy to hate lords. It is harder to see how the hatred itself becomes another sword. "So you stole the bell," I said. He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks without sound. "If they cannot ring it," he said, then they must swear without it. They must look at each other without the sound to hide behind. They must mean it." The swordsman barked a laugh. "Hear that? A monk playing politics!" Jinnen flinched again. I looked at the man with the sword. "You are the retainer from the lake," I said. He stiffened. "And if I am?" "You paid smugglers to take the bell down the mountain," I said, "but you did not tell your lord, or you did. Either way, you wanted the treaty to fail." His eyes flashed. "My lord will not be made a fool," he spat. "The Eastern Dog thinks to take our villages one by one, a treaty sworn to a bell, paper and sound, worthless. The only oath a man keeps is the one he fears to break." "And you feared to break your lord's hunger," I said. He took a step forward. "Enough!" he snarled. Jinnen cried out, "No!" The swordsman shoved him aside as if he were a sack of rice. I did not move. I let the man come closer until he could see my face clearly in the dim light. I let him see that I did not hate him. That is what unsettles men most. "What will you do?" I asked quietly. "Kill me at a shrine beside a bell meant to call beings away from killing?" His nostrils flared. His hand tightened on the hilt. He was deciding which story to live inside. Behind him the ox shifted, its hooves squelching in mud. The bell lay heavy and silent. The world waited. Then the swordsman's shoulders sagged a fraction. Not surrender, calculation. "You monks," he muttered. "You think words can stop steel?" "I think," I said, "that steel is made by men, and men can stop." He spat into the mud. "Even if I leave you," he said, "the treaty will fail. The bell is not there. And even if you haul it back, my lord will not trust the Eastern Lord. The Eastern Lord will not trust my lord. Their men want blood. The peasants want revenge. The border wants an answer." He spoke like a man reciting facts. In his mouth, facts sounded like fate. I knelt beside the bell. The bronze was cold through my sleeve. I traced the raised characters along its side, half hidden under mud. "For the benefit of all beings," the inscription said, "may the sound reach the 6 realms." I remembered my teacher's words. A bell is only bronze, but men will die for bronze. I looked up. "You're right about one thing," I said. "The bell does not make a treaty true." The swordsman frowned, thrown off balance by agreement. I turned to Jinan. He was sitting on the ground where he had been shoved, robe stained with mud, tears drying on his cheeks. "Jinan," I said, "you broke a precept." He flinched as if struck. "And you did it because you were attached," I continued. "Attached to the idea that removing a thing removes men's hearts." He whispered, "I only wanted—" "I know," I said. "Wanting is not evil. But wanting can be a rope around your neck." "No game," I said. "A question." I turned my gaze toward the pass. Somewhere beyond it, men were sharpening swords. Somewhere below, the lake lay like dull metal. Somewhere at the foot of the mountain, 2 lords waited for a sound to save them from their own decisions. "What is an oath worth?" I asked aloud, not to the men but to the mist, when no one is listening for the bell. The swordsman snorted. "An oath is worth what a lord's army can enforce." "And what is an army worth?" I said. "When spring comes, and the rice seedlings rot because men were marching instead of planting." He said nothing. I spoke then not as a debater, but as a monk who has watched too many funerals. "Take the bell," I told him. "If you melt it, you will gain bronze. If you return it, you will gain a sound. Either way, the world will keep turning. But if the treaty fails today, children will die before the snow melts." His jaw clenched. I stepped closer to him, so close he could smell the smoke in my robe. "Send a message to your lord," I said. "Tell him the bell was stolen by neither lord. Tell him it was taken by a monk of the mountain and seized by you. Tell him I have seen it. Tell him this. If he wants peace, he must swear without the bell." His eyes widened. "He will think it weakness." "He will think it whatever his fear tells him," I said. "But he will hear it from your mouth, not from your enemies." The swordsman stared at the bell, then at me. His hand loosened on his hilt. At last he said, "If I do this, and my lord chooses war, you will have accomplished nothing." I nodded. "Perhaps," he scoffed. "You admit it." "Zen does not promise outcomes," I said. "It only asks you to meet what is real." For a long moment he stood motionless. Then he gestured sharply to the farmer-dressed man. "Go," he said. "Take the fast path to camp. Tell them what you heard." The man hesitated, eyes darting toward me, then ran into the fog. The swordsman turned back to me. "And you?" he demanded. "Will you haul this bell up the mountain alone?" "No," I said. He laughed short. "Then what?" "Then I will go to the summit," I said, "and I will ask 2 lords to make a vow without leaning on bronze." Jinan stared at me as if I had suggested asking wolves to eat grass. "It will not work," he whispered. "Then we will see," I said. "That is all anyone ever does." I left the clearing as the first true light of dawn spread through the fog, turning it gold at the edges. Behind me, the bell remained silent, heavy as consequence. The path down to the valley was steeper than the road I had climbed the day before. In places it was no more than a ribbon of packed earth between rocks. Frost made the stones slick. Twice I had to plant my staff carefully and feel for grip before trusting my weight. As the sun rose, the fog began to lift in slow shreds. Through gaps I saw the world below. Terraces of fields like stepped cloth. A river cutting a pale line through the valley. clusters of houses with smoke rising. Beyond, the lake gleamed, and on its surface tiny boats moved like insects. By midday I reached the foot of the mountain. The air was warmer here, carrying the smell of wood smoke, wet earth and animals. And men. The camps had been set on opposite sides of the valley's wide flat, where a river widened and slowed before bending toward the lake. Lord Akiyama's banners, dark cloth marked with a white crest, stood to the west nearer the road that led to the lakeside villages. Lord Tsuruga's banners, red with a black emblem, stood to the east, nearer the pass. Between the camps lay a strip of trampled ground, empty except for a low pavilion hastily built of poles and thatch. It was meant to be neutral ground, but neutrality is a thin garment in winter. Armed men watched me as I approached. Some looked bored, others hungry. A monk walking between armies looks like either a blessing or a fool. Sometimes those are the same thing. An officer stepped forward, hand on his sword, and blocked my way. "Name," he demanded. "Ryosen," I said, and showed him the letter from Kyoto. He glanced at it, then at my face, then waved me through. "Don't wander," he snapped. "Arrows wander." The pavilion held a long, low table and cushions. Braziers smoked at the corners, not quite warming the air. Two scribes sat with inkstones and paper ready, eyes flicking nervously between entrances. Lord Akiyama arrived first. He was older than I remembered, his beard threaded with grey. He wore layered robes rather than armor, but a sword hung at his side. His eyes were sharp, his mouth tight with the practiced impatience of a man used to obedience. Lord Tsuruga arrived soon after, younger, broad-shouldered, his hair pulled into a knot. He wore a light cuirass beneath his robe, a man not trusting cloth alone. They bowed stiffly to each other, then sat. The air between them felt like a drawn bowstring. An attendant announced, "Ryosen of Miyoshinji, invited mediator." Both lords turned to look at me as if measuring the weight of my words. Their eyes were not cruel, they were simply the eyes of men trained to see advantage. Lord Akiyama spoke first. "The bell?" he asked, and I said, "It is not here." Lord Tsuruga's fingers tightened on his knee. "Then this summit is useless," he said flatly. Akiyama's mouth curved into something like a smile. "Unless it is you who took it," he said. Tsuruga's eyes flashed. "You accuse me in my face?" Akiyama shrugged. "Someone took it. A bell does not grow legs." Tsuruga leaned forward, voice low and dangerous. "Your men were seen near the mountain path last night." Akiyama's eyes narrowed. "My men were seen near my villages," he snapped, "where your raiders have been stealing rice." The scribes looked down, pretending not to hear. The attendants stiffened. I waited until their voices began to rise. Then I spoke, not loudly, but with the tone used in a meditation hall, when a novice begins to fidget too much. "Lords," I said. They paused, annoyed to have their momentum interrupted. "You demanded the bell," I continued. "Why?" Akiyama stared at me. "Because the mountain people trust it," he said. "Because my vassals trust it. Because when the bell rings, it is as if the Buddhas themselves have heard the vow." Tsuruga added, "And because without it a written oath is only ink. Men can spill ink as easily as blood." I nodded. "So you want the bell to do what you doubt yourselves able to do?" Akiyama's eyes hardened. "Careful, monk." "I am careful," I said. "That is why I speak plainly." Tsuruga's jaw clenched. "Where is the bell?" I did not tell them about Kuroishi Shrine, not yet. If I said the bell had been in the hands of a retainer from the lake, Akiyama would seize on it as proof of betrayal. If I said a monk had stolen it, they would call the temple treacherous and perhaps punish it. Truth, spoken at the wrong moment, can be a spark in dry grass. "Someone took it to break this summit," I said instead. Akiyama sneered. "Then we know who benefits." Tsuruga laughed without humor. "You always think you know." Their hands drifted toward their swords, not as threats, but as habits. The body remembers what the mind tries to hide. I leaned forward slightly. "You came here," I said, "because your advisors told you the valley cannot survive another season of skirmishing. You came because you want your taxes, You came because you want to sleep without worrying that your neighbor will strike while you are weak. Do not pretend you came for virtue, neither denied it. Denial would have been childish. I continued. The bell is missing, so your choice is simple. You may leave and let your men kill each other, or you may make a vow without the bell. Akiyama stared. Without it, the oath has no witness. I nodded. Then let the witness be the people who will suffer if you break it. Tsuruga scoffed. Peasants do not hold lords to oaths. They do, I said, when they stop planting. That struck closer than philosophy. Hunger is a better teacher than scripture. Akiyama's eyes flicked toward the pavilion entrance, toward the valley beyond where smoke rose from village roofs. And what do you propose? He asked. I turned to the scribes. Prepare the kishiman, I said. They hesitated, looking to the lords. The lords did not stop them. Inkstones were wetted. Brushes were ground. Kishiman? Tsuruga repeated. An oath document with curses? In the old way, I said. You may invoke whatever you believe listens. Bonten, Taishaku, the four heavenly kings, Hachiman, the mountain kami. Or you may invoke nothing and let your own mind be the witness. Choose. Akiyama's mouth tightened. And the bell? I looked at both men. If your vow requires a bell to bind it, I said, then you have already admitted you plan to unbind it when convenient. Silence fell. Outside I heard a crow call once. The river moved. Somewhere in one of the camps a horse whinnied. Tsuruga's eyes narrowed. You speak boldly for a man with no soldiers. I speak boldly, I said, because I have nothing to defend except what is true. Akiyama's fingers drummed once against his knee. Right, he said sharply to the scribe. The scribe's brush moved. Characters formed on paper like black insects marching in lines. When the oath was ready, both lords read it in silence. Each added his seal. Each pressed thumb to ink, then to paper. Then came the moment where the bell should have rung. The pavilion held its breath. Akiyama looked up. His voice was quieter now. So, he said, we swear without sound. Yes, I said. He stared at the empty air, as if he could hear the missing bell. Then he said almost reluctantly, very well. Tsuruga nodded once. Very well. The scribes rolled the document carefully and sealed it. An attendant placed it in a lacquered box. I stood. Now, I said, we will go to the temple. Akiyama frowned. Without the bell? Without the bell, I agreed. We walked together, two lords, their guards hovering like shadows, and a monk between them, toward Mount Kōrin's lower hall, a smaller building at the mountain's base used for pilgrims and village ceremonies. Inside, an altar held a simple statue of Kannon, the bodhisattva of compassion. Incense burned. The air smelled clean and sharp. I lit 3 sticks and placed them in the ash. The smoke rose straight, untroubled. I began to chant the Heart Sutra, not loudly, not with performance, but with the steady cadence of daily practice. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. The guards shifted, uneasy. Warriors are uncomfortable around words that do not flatter their strength. When the chant ended, I bowed once to the altar. The lords stiffly did the same. I turned to them. Your oath is made, I said. You have sealed it with ink and your own hands. The bell did not hear you, so you must hear yourselves. Akiyama's eyes held mine. If he breaks it, he said, meaning Tsuruga, what then? I did not answer with comfort. Then you will choose what kind of man you are, I said. Tsuruga's jaw tightened. And if he breaks it first, he asked, meaning Akiyama. Then you will choose, I repeated. Neither liked that. They wanted guarantees. Everyone wants guarantees. Zen offers none. Outside the hall I could feel the camps shifting, men whispering, messengers running. Word would spread that the treaty had been sworn without the bell. Some would call it weak, some would call it brave. Many would call it suspicious, but it was done. As the lords departed back to their camps, I remained in the hall a moment longer, listening to the incense crackle softly as it burned. The bell was still missing, yet the valley had not erupted into violence, at least not yet. I rose and began the climb back up the mountain. Mount Kōrin in daylight was a different creature than at night. The cedar forest shimmered with moisture. Sunlight caught on threads of spiderweb. The stream beside the path ran clear, its stones slick and green. Halfway up, I met a group of villagers carrying bundles of firewood. They bowed quickly when they saw my robe, then hurried past. Fear makes men quick. At the temple gate, Shunei waited. He had not gone down to the summit. His duty was to the mountain, not the valley. But his eyes searched my face like a man reading clouds. "It is sworn," I said. He exhaled, a sound that was almost a laugh. "Without the bell?" "Without it," I confirmed. He looked past me toward the bell tower visible through the courtyard trees. The empty space still glared. "You found it?" he asked, hope and dread mixed. "Yes," I said. His eyebrows rose. "Where?" "At Kuroishi Shrine," I said. "In the hands of a retainer from the lake, and in the hands of your novice." Shunei's face did not change much, but his eyes softened with something that might have been grief. "Jinin," he murmured. I nodded. For a long moment the abbot said nothing. Then he asked quietly, "Did you bring the bell back?" "No," I said. The word hung between us like a stone. He closed his eyes briefly. "Then it may already be lost." "It may," I said. "Or it may still be saved." He opened his eyes again, sharp now. "Why did you leave it?" "Because," I said, "if I had dragged it here first and let it ring at the summit, the lords would have believed the bell did their work. They would have gone back to their camps with the sound in their ears and the same old hunger in their hearts." Shunei's gaze held mine. He was weighing my words not as argument but as practice. "And now?" he asked. "Now," I said, "the bell is still a bell, but the treaty is not hanging from it. The treaty hangs from two men's minds. If they keep it, it will be because they chose to. If they break it, there will be no bell to blame." Shunei's mouth tightened. "You speak like a teacher," he said, "and yet you risk our bell." "I risk it," I admitted, "and I risk that men will suffer if I am wrong." He stared toward the forest, toward the unseen shrine. Then he said softly, almost to himself, "A bell is only bronze." "Yes," I said, "but it is also a voice that calls monks to wake." He looked back at me. "Will you go again?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I will bring it home, if it can be brought." He bowed his head slightly. "Then take men, take oxen, take what you need." I shook my head. "If armed men go to Kuroishi, the retainer will think the treaty was a trick. He will run, and the bell will vanish into the mountains or into a furnace." Shunei's eyes narrowed. "Then who?" "Jinin," I said. The abbot's expression sharpened. "He is a thief." "He is a grieving boy," I said, "and he is the only one who can walk into that clearing without being seen as an enemy." Shunei's lips pressed together. "You would trust him?" "I would trust him with a chance to make amends," I said. The abbot's eyes closed for a long breath. When he opened them, there was exhaustion there, and acceptance. "Bring him," he said. Jinin came trembling when summoned. He knelt in the abbot's room, head bowed so low his forehead touched the mat. "I have shamed the mountain," he whispered. Shunei's voice was quiet but hard. "You have broken a precept. You have endangered the temple. You have used the Dharma as a weapon." Jinin's shoulders shook. "Yes," he said. Shunei looked at me. "Take him," he said. Jinin's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Where?" "To return what you took," I said. His face twisted with fear and relief. "They will kill me," he whispered. "Perhaps," I said. "Or perhaps you will discover that death is not the only consequence." We descended together. Jinin walked slightly behind me, as novices do, his gaze fixed on the ground. The mountain path was drying under the winter sun, the mud stiffening. When we reached the fork where the road climbed toward the pass, Jinin stopped. I thought it would be a teaching," he whispered. "I thought if the bell was gone, they would have to be honest." "And were they?" I asked. He swallowed. "They swore," he said. "Without it—" "Yes," I said. "So your theft did not stop the treaty. It only showed how close men are to war when a symbol is taken." He flinched, understanding. We reached Kuroishi Shrine in late afternoon. The fog had returned in thin sheets, drifting between trees. The shrine looked unchanged. Torii gate, foxes, camphor tree. But the ground behind the storehouse held fresh ruts. The bell had been moved. My stomach tightened. Time is not merciful. We followed the ruts down a narrow path behind the shrine, into a stand of trees where the ground dipped. There, in the same clearing as before, the bell lay, still on its side, still wrapped in cloth, but now with ropes tightened around it, ready for hauling. The swordsman stood beside it, arms folded. The farmer-dressed man was not there. Only one other man remained, crouched by the ox, adjusting the yoke. When the swordsman saw us, his expression did not change much, but his eyes narrowed. "You returned," he said to me, not a question. "Yes," I said. His gaze shifted to Jinin. Recognition flickered, then disdain. "The thief, monk!" Jinin bowed deeply. "I did wrong," he said, voice shaking. "I ask forgiveness." The swordsman laughed. "Forgiveness? You stole a bell and nearly started a war. Do you think bowing fixes that?" Jinin's hands trembled on the ground. "No," he whispered. I only... "Enough!" the swordsman snapped. I stepped forward slightly. "Where is your lord's message?" I asked. The swordsman's mouth tightened. "Sent," he said. "My lord is furious. He says the treaty sworn without the bell is suspect. He says the Eastern lord may have planned it." "And what do you think?" I asked. He stared at the bell. "I think," he said slowly, "that men use any excuse they can hold." "That is the first honest thing you've said," I replied. His eyes flashed. "Do not insult me." "I am not insulting you," I said. "I am describing the world you serve." He spat. "And what will you do now? Take the bell, drag it up the mountain, ring it like a charm to make men behave?" "No," I said. He frowned. "Then why are you here?" I walked to the bell and placed my palm on its bronze. The metal was warmer than before, warmed by sun, by the bodies that had handled it. Even bronze changes. "I am here," I said, "because this bell belongs to a temple. It is not yours to sell, not yours to melt, not mine to use as a tool for lords." The swordsman's jaw clenched. "It belongs to the one who can hold it," he said. I looked at him. "Then hold it," I said softly. "Hold it alone forever, and see if it feeds you." He stared, confused. I continued. "You told me earlier that an oath is worth what a lord's army can enforce. You were right in a way, but there is another measure. An oath is worth what a man is willing to lose by breaking it." He said nothing. I gestured toward the bell. "If you sell this, you gain coin. If you melt it, you gain bronze. If you return it, you gain nothing you can eat. Only the knowledge that you did not add one more lie to this valley." His eyes narrowed. "And what does that knowledge buy me?" I smiled slightly. Not mockery, recognition. "Nothing," I said. "That is why it is rare." He stared at me as if seeing a trap. Men trained in war see traps everywhere. Sometimes the trap is simply a clean offer. The ox snorted. The other man shifted, uneasy. Finally the swordsman said, "If I let you take it, my lord will punish me." I nodded. "And if you keep it," I said, "your lord may reward you. But what will you reward yourself with when you remember that you stole a bell meant to call beings away from suffering?" He scoffed. "You think I sit and remember? I have work." "Everyone has work," I said, "even the dead." That landed. I saw it in his eyes, a flicker of something older than ambition, something like fatigue. He looked at Jinin. "And you," he snapped. "You wanted the lords to swear without the bell. They did. Are you satisfied?" Jinin's voice was barely audible. "No," he said, because I see now I wanted them to be honest so I would not have to be afraid. I wanted to control them." The swordsman stared at him, startled by the candor. Jinin bowed again, deeper. "I broke the precept because I wanted the world to obey my grief," he whispered. Shunei would have said that more harshly. I said nothing. Jinin had already heard it. The swordsman's gaze went back to the bell, his shoulders slumped, the war posture loosening. "Take it," he muttered. The words were small, almost lost in the mist. The other man looked up sharply. "What?" "I said take it," the swordsman snapped, "before I change my mind." I did not move immediately. I let the moment settle. A man who gives something up needs to feel the weight leave his hands. Then I nodded. "Thank you," I said. He glared. "Do not thank me. I'm not doing it for you." "I know," I said. "You are doing it for yourself." He turned away, angry to be seen. Now came the practical problem. A bell does not float up a mountain on virtue. I had arranged quietly for 2 lay brothers from the temple to wait near the shrine with an ox cart. They arrived at dusk, breathless, eyes wide at the sight of the bell. With ropes, rollers, and grunted effort, we loaded the bell onto the cart. The bronze shifted with a groan like a creature waking. The ox strained, hooves digging into mud. The swordsman watched without helping. When the bell was finally settled, he spoke once more, his voice low. "Monk," he said. I turned. He hesitated, then asked almost reluctantly, "If the lords break the treaty, what will you do?" I looked at him. The question was not about tactics. It was about whether his small act had mattered. "I will do what I am doing now," I said. "I will try to keep the world from burning, one foolish moment at a time." He stared, then gave a short laugh, something like relief. "Go," he said, waving us off. "And take your damned question with you." We began the slow climb back toward Mount Kōrin, the cart creaking, the ox breathing hard, mist closing around us like water. We reached the temple late at night. Lanterns were lit in the courtyard. Monks stood waiting, their faces pale in the light. When they saw the bell on the cart, a murmur moved through them like wind through grass. Shunei came out into the cold air and stood before the bell. He did not touch it. He simply looked, as if greeting an old friend returned from war. Jinan fell to his knees beside the cart, forehead to the ground. Shunei's voice was quiet. "You will serve in the kitchen for a season," he said to Jinan. "You will carry water. You will scrub pots. You will listen more than you speak." Jinan's shoulders shook. "Yes," he whispered. Shunei looked at me. "And you?" he asked. "I will sleep," I said honestly. He nodded. "Tomorrow," he said, "we will hang it again." "And the summit?" I asked. "It is already done," he said. "Now we will see if paper and fear can hold men back." I stood beneath the empty bell tower one last time that night. The bell was still on the cart, not yet lifted. The tower's emptiness was no longer an ache, but an anticipation. A bell cannot ring itself. It needs a striker. It needs hands. It needs a reason. In the distance, beyond the ridge, I could see faint torchlight from the camps below, moving points, restless. Men do not sleep easily when peace is new. I returned to the guest hall and lay down. My body was exhausted, but my mind would not settle. I watched the darkness behind my eyelids and listened to the mountain's small sounds, the creak of wood in cold, the distant rush of the stream, a monk's cough. Somewhere deep in the night, a thought rose and would not leave. What is an oath worth when no one is listening for the bell? At dawn, we raised the bell. It took ropes and pulleys, the strength of lay brothers and monks, the careful guidance of Shunei's steady hands. The bell swung slowly up into the tower's empty space as if returning to its natural element. When the chain was secured, when the bell hung straight, the courtyard held still. Shunei stood before it. The striker log had been recovered as well, brought back from the thieves' bundle and cleaned. It hung from its own ropes, ready. Shunei looked at me. "Strike it," he said. I hesitated. It would have been easy to let the abbot do it, to step aside. But Zen does not teach us to step aside from responsibility. I took hold of the striker. It was heavy, smooth, damp with cold. I drew it back slowly, feeling the tension in the ropes, the weight wanting to swing. In that moment, I did not think of lords or treaties. I thought of the monks who would wake to its sound, of villagers who heard it on clear mornings and felt, for a breath, that the world was larger than their hunger, of hungry ghosts in the 6 realms, imagined or real, who might be comforted by a sound that asked nothing. Then I released the striker. It swung forward and struck the bell. The sound was not loud like a shout. It was deep, spreading, filling space the way water fills a bowl. It rolled out over the courtyard, through the cedar trees, down the mountain slope. It carried into the valley. I imagined it reaching the camps below, vibrating in the ribs of men who had slept with hands near sword hilts. I imagined it reaching the river and the lake, the fishing boats, the winter fields. The sound lasted longer than a man's anger, longer than a threat. It lasted as long as it lasted, and then it faded. When it was gone, the mountain did not feel empty. It felt awake. Shonai's eyes were closed. His lips moved silently. Perhaps a prayer. Perhaps nothing. Jinan stood among the novices, his face wet with tears that did not look like self-pity now, but like relief. After a time, Shunai opened his eyes and looked at me. "Did the bell bind the treaty?" he asked. "No," I said. "What did it bind?" he asked. I listened, to the stream, to the wind, to the faint distant noises of the valley. "It bound my attention," I said finally. For a moment, there was only sound. Shunai nodded. "Then it has done its true work." Later that day, a messenger climbed the mountain, one of Lord Akiyama's men. His boots were muddy, his breath ragged. He bowed stiffly to Shunai and thrust a sealed letter forward. The abbot broke the seal and read. His face did not change much. When he finished, he handed the letter to me. The treaty held, for now. The camps were breaking. The lords would return to their lands. Each would watch the other like a hawk watches a rabbit. But the valley would have a season without marching. I handed the letter back. Shunai said, "So it seems your question did not start a war." "Not today," I said. He smiled faintly. "Do you still think the thief meant it as a koan?" I thought of Jinan's grief, the swordsman's calculation, the lord's pride. "I think," I said, "the world makes koans whether we intend them or not. We only decide whether we will look." Shunai's gaze lifted toward the bell tower. The bell hung quietly in the pale winter sun, its bronze skin catching light. "What is an oath worth?" he murmured, "when no one is listening?" I answered him with the only thing I knew to be true. "It is worth exactly what the one who swears is willing to become," I said. "Nothing more, nothing less." Shunai nodded once, as if that settled something that could never truly be settled. That evening, when the hour came, the bell rang again, one strike deep and patient. I listened, and for that moment I did not think of treaties or lords or stolen bronze. I thought only of sound moving through mist, asking nothing, binding nothing, and yet somehow holding the world together for the length of a breath.